Have you ever thought about the difference between the impact you make and the imprint you leave on people? This week I talked with Natanja Craig-Oquendo, Executive Director of the Boston Women's Fund, who shares a powerful perspective on how our lived experiences shape the way we see ourselves and how we lead. In this conversation, we talk about how early messages about identity, race, and belonging stay with us, why the words people use about us shape what we believe is possible, why saying hard things out loud can bring people closer together. Natanja shares how her life experiences shaped her path to nonprofit work and philanthropy. We also explore her distinction between impact and imprint and what it means to create a meaningful experience for others in our everyday interactions. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Tanya. It's so wonderful to have you here. I'm excited for this conversation, and I would love to start by inviting you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Kim. I love your podcast. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak with you, especially about imposter syndrome. I think in order to know a leader, honestly, you have to know who they come from, right? Like who helped shape me. And so if I could start there, because my family is everything to me. So I was born to biracial parents. My father is from the South. My mom grew up in Fitchburg. My grandmother came by way of Canada, so a French Canadian woman who landed in Fitchburg. My mother and father met here in Boston while they were doing some organizing. And I bring that up for a couple of reasons. One, because my mother came into the relationship with two fully white children that my father adopted. And so I never grew up understanding until I was 13, actually. And someone told me that my sisters were my half sisters. So that just gives you an understanding of like, we didn't play about family. When we were just family. I learned about allyship, if I'm being honest, at the dinner table. My mother spoke and my father spoke so often, not only of who we were as a family, but they got married very short, like 2 or 3 years after the Loving Law was passed, and the Loving Law was allowed interracial couples to actually marry, but it was still a very hard time in our country as it relates to race. And it was particularly a really hard time in Boston. So this was during busing around 1972. And I bring that up because as we sat around the table and we learned about allyship, as we learned about community organizing, because busing was happening, as we learned about how we hold each other as a family when somebody is going through something hard. And I want to mention this, like my sisters were fully white, and they had to go to Umana, which was, we lived in Roxbury, which is across Boston. And they faced violence because there was this violence happening in the city. And so sometimes we had to hold space for them. I bring all that up to say, my parents, they didn't mince words, and they were very clear about who we were as a family. They were also very clear about what our values were. Allyship showed up at our table because my mother taught us about what that looked like. When I think about racial justice or gender justice, those were conversations that we continued to have throughout my youth. And my parents eventually became divorced. But I remember we were walking to our new apartment in Villa Victoria. And let me just tell you, this is very quick, Kim, and I promise I'll wrap it up after this. But we're walking, we're leaving a shelter, and we're walking. We have these bags. This is how close the shelter was, Kim. So we have these bags, these black bags of all of our stuff. 6 of us, 6 kids. My mom has 6 children all together. We all lived in these 2 bedrooms, and we finally got a 4-bedroom. And our apartment in Villa Victoria was in front of the park. And I was like, that's how I know I'm God's favorite. Because I was like, who would put me in front of a park? I get first dibs on swings and get all the all that being said is that as we were walking, my mother was like, let me tell you about Villa Victoria. Let me tell you about the Puerto Rican activists that saved this land. Let me tell you about their names. Let me tell you about Maria. Let me tell you about Carmen. Let me tell you about Jose. My mother didn't play when it came to those who often stories did not get told. But as we were walking, I knew that that land, because of urban renewal, was essentially Villa Victoria, before it was that, became a tent city where people put their bodies in place for homes for me and my family. That is who I am. That is where I come from.
Wow. I thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely love when you talked about your parents not mincing words and just the ability to have those conversations so naturally. And I feel like that gives you the ability to communicate, probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in ways that other people are not necessarily taught or not necessarily experienced. And I think that we're missing out on a
Mhm.
lot of important conversations because too many people aren't having them in the way that you're describing.
You know what I think about hard conversations, Kim? I think that when you are in the right relationship, they should bring you closer. And
Mm.
so I have had friends who have had completely different lived experience than me. And we've had to sit and have conversations around capitalism and what that meant in my life versus what it meant in hers, right? But those are conversations that helped us understand who each other is. And I think you're right. I think now, don't get me wrong, Kim, I will avoid conflict if I need to. But my work doesn't allow me not to have hard conversations, right? And so there is a part of me that, really believes that how love shows up is in the harder conversations. And so, and I think that's what my mom and my dad taught us. And of course, that played out in many ways as the youngest of six. Sometimes hard conversations turned into like refereed fights, right? But but we got through it. But I do think that conflict and healthy conflict, especially now, Kim, right? Like when we're all holding on to things, and as the world is kind of worlding, I don't even know what else to call it, around us. I think now is a real time for us to say the quiet things out loud. That has been a goal of mine for the last couple of years, just to be really honest, for myself, is not to hide behind the fear that sometimes I'm feeling. So yeah, I think having more of those the quiet things that usually I would hold in, I'm starting to say out loud so that we could have space for those conversations.
And I really want to talk about what you do now, but I also want to fill in some of the space in between that,
Sure.
you grew up with these values, you grew up in a family where you talked a lot about identity and who you are. And I wonder how that shaped the journey
Oh
along
yeah.
the way between sort of there and where well, the work you do today and who you see, how you see yourself today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I started off in, so I mean, I started off in corporate America, and I remember being there for about 4 or 5 years and just like soul knowing, I don't know how else to say that, right? Like my soul knew that that's not where my work would be, right? I knew that there was a means to an end. I was a very young mother, Kim. I had my first daughter at 15. Shout out to Samantha Rivera. She's incredible, a beautiful, beautiful being here in Boston, and doing incredible community organizing. And I think about, I think about often, um, when I was labeled a teenage mother, how much of people's expectations of me changed. And I think that was a big part of kind of, where I decided where I saw myself. If I'm being 100% honest, when I first got pregnant, I said, I am going to get my own apartment in Villa Victoria. We will live here forever and ever, my daughter and I, in the bliss of where I grew up. And then she allowed me to dream bigger. And that bigger ended up being my first job, which was at a corporate organization, a corporation that I was like, okay, I think it's important for us to try things. And I knew that that wasn't a place for me. I felt like a square that was trying to be pushed into like a hole. And then I went into nonprofit work, and that kind of took a little bit of a turn. I was a little all over the place, if I'm being honest. My first nonprofit role was about retaining Black and Brown individual doctors, scientists here in Boston. So many of them come here for school, but then they end up leaving to go to DC, Atlanta. And that was really the first time me being around professionals of that caliber. And I think that that helped me see myself differently. If I'm being really honest, Kim, that was the first time that I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to play small. I get to play. I actually get to decide. And I think for so long, especially being a teen mom, I think I took on the identities that the my community said teen moms would end up, right? And I say that because um, my community was hard on me. I'm just being really honest. And I think that allowed me, being at the Partnership Inc. specifically, that is where they retain Black and Brown professionals here in Boston, allowed me to see myself differently. From there, I moved on to the Urban League, but then eventually landed in philanthropy. And philanthropy is where I always say I started at the Boston Foundation, and that is where I got my college degree. In Boston Women's Fund, where I'm at now, is where I'm getting my PhD in philanthropy. So
I love
my education was not traditional, but it's been incredible.
Well, and I want to go back to what you were saying too about the shift in your ability to see what's possible. And I think that that is, and you and I started to touch on this before we hit the record button too, of like the message the world sends you, like different influential voices or people in the world of like what is possible for you based on race, based on gender, based on socioeconomic status, right? And it's like, and there's a way in which we don't know what we don't know. And so we absorb those messages and just assume like, well, that's it for me, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so for you, the way I'm hearing you is that like this was a turning point for you in your ability to say, like, oh, there's more
Mhm.
than just what the box that I've been
Yeah.
put into,
That's
right?
right. That's right. When, growing up, I am a firm believer. If you can see it, you can be it. And I never really understood that. And I used to think it was like the corniest thing to say. But as I reflect on, just my life in general, when I look back, it wasn't until that moment where I realized oh, you get to dream bigger than you ever have. Like you may have been dreaming too small. To have your own apartment in Villa Victoria is incredible. Like that's okay. But what would it look like to have a house? What would it look like, right? Like just to start to think bigger. Because in my head, Kim, I thought as a teenage mother, I'm probably going to rent forever. I'm probably going to be in poverty forever. Like the data told me my daughter would be in poverty forever, right? Like, and I think that it's important for us to be reminded of the words we use when we are speaking to our young people, when we are speaking to other women. It lands in us and it grows. And that could be good, that could be positive affirmations, and that could be negative ones. I tended to hold on to the negative ones, which gave me imposter syndrome till this day.
Mm,
So, and I think that that's unfortunate.
yeah, and it's such a good point too of the just the way that it sticks, right? And I think hearing you talk about or ask yourself, what if I had a house, or like dreaming
Yes.
bigger in that way is so antithetical to imposter syndrome, which is like, who am I to think
Yes.
about like who
That's
am
right. Who
right?
am I to dream big? Who am
Mhm.
I to shine my light? Who am I to have an opinion? Who am I to shape philanthropy? Literally, this is my biggest question every single day, that God reminds me who I am. But my question is, who am I? A poor girl that grew up in Boston, that comes from a biracial family, that has dyslexia, that has lived experience, that had a daughter at 15. Who the hell am I to say that I'm going to change philanthropy? I am Natanja Craig-Oquendo because I believe that philanthropy can change. I believe that. So I think that, but that trash in my head, that the imposter syndrome that's literally sneaks in every single day, it's the who am I?
Mhm.
Um, affirmation that I just said to you that reminds me that all of this experience that I have been given, right? That is what makes me effective at my role. Is being able to say, I do understand, when I'm having a conversation about economics. I understand. I remember what it was like going to pantries with my youngest daughter and holding her so tight from embarrassment and the dignity I didn't feel in receiving the goods that I got. And so there is a vulnerability that I bring to this work, but there is also an understanding of how expensive it is to be poor, first of all, but B, how dignity really does get stripped from you. And so those messages may not have been the same, like Tanya being a teenage mom, but as I struggled to continue to build wealth for my family, there were points along the way, Kim, where I was reminded of who I was when I was 14, or 15 when I got pregnant. And so those are the little, those are the seeds that we plant that end up really sprouting in us if we're not careful about, how we are unlearning a lot of what we've been taught.
Yeah, yeah. And when I listen to you talk too, I hear the passion about the work that you do and the mission. I wonder, like, I've always been of the mindset that if we focus less on being an expert or having to prove ourselves, being the smartest person in the room, and we focus more on how can I be of service? How can I make the kind of impact that I want to make?
Yeah. Yeah.
That I'm going to feel more confident as a result because I'm not looking inward at my, like, do I measure up? I'm thinking
Yeah.
about what I'm here to do,
Yeah.
right? And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about what your mission is, the work that you do, and how being mission driven may
Mhm.
or may not kind of help with some of that head trash that you're describing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely being able, I've been at the Boston Women's Fund now, and please visit us there. I've been there now almost 7 years. This is my first executive director position. So when I tell you imposter syndrome be sneaking in, you see it sneaks in, and I'd be like, hey, I have a name for imposter syndrome, but I'm not going to tell you because it's a swear. But I push imposter syndrome the hell up out of here. I say, homie, this is not the time, place, nor did I make space for you on purpose. So I'm gonna tuck you back where you belong. Um, but the Boston Women's Fund is we are here to serve and partner with grassroots organizations that are working on social, gender, economic justice. These are, I consider them community first responders, Kim. They are the people who have organizations that tend to be a little bit smaller. So we support organizations who have an operating budget of under $500,000. That means that many of them are operating around 250. Many of them are volunteer-led organizations. These are leaders who lead with passion and purpose, and they pivot. They are leaders of their community, so they have a deepening and an understanding of what they do. And we do a couple of things. One, we obviously support them through grants. We're a fund. We're an intermediary, so we raise money to then reallocate it out. We also have leadership programs for our leaders that are actually about unlearning. They're not leadership programs that are like 101, come learn about development. No, there's many of those. We have spaces and places for our leaders, women of color and queer leaders, or gender expansive leaders specifically, just to come and think about when you quiet the noise that's all around you, what kind of leader do you want to be? What is your mantra? Have you gotten away from the purpose of who you want to be? So these are when I talk about Horizon Collective, which is our leadership program, it really is about getting to a lot of what the podcast talks about is like, how do we begin to unlearn and get some of this junk out of us so that we can be the most effective leaders that we can. And then last but not least, I don't think enough leaders talk about this, but many of our missions are not living inside of our organizations, Kim. And there are, for me, when I decided to run an organization, I said, I'm going to build something I've never been a part of. I'm going to build something where that mission is living and thriving as much internally as it is externally. And so we have 3 values, which is love, belonging, and flow. And that shows up every day in our work. I send a gratitude email to my team every Monday, reminding them of who they are. And sometimes it's about, I literally said one, I said, I just missed her voice. I said, Kiara, you have the most beautiful voice, and we weren't in the office last week, and I found myself missing your hum, or sometimes it goes deeper, right? It's about you got the report done, right? Like the report is out there, it's in the world, it's going to be a ripple effect. But they all see it every single day. So though, to me, Boston Women's Fund is such an incredibly special place. There's nothing we do without community at every single level. We are really trying to disrupt not just power dynamics, but how philanthropy sees itself in this work, and how we see ourselves partnering with the communities we say that we care the most about. So I feel very lucky to lead that work and to have an incredible team alongside me.
Ah, it's so inspirational to hear you talk about the work that you do, and so important, especially in this moment in history where there's a
Yeah.
lot a lot going on. And I wonder too of how do you manage sometimes the we sort of talked about this before too, but like sometimes the negative messaging isn't coming from inside, it's coming from
Mhm.
outside. And like how do you stay steady as a leader, and how do you help your team navigate some of the just ugliness that we're facing as a country, as just a society right now?
Yeah. Yeah, these are people. I'm starting to hear people say they're not really that unprecedented. For me, these are unprecedented times. I'm gonna name what it is for me.
Mhm.
And it's a day by day thing, Kim. It is sometimes it's my staff slowing me down because I might have missed something. But it really is just about making space, not just for the work, but for all of the things that are happening around the work. At Boston Women's Funds, relationships mean everything to us. So we have gotten rid of all applications, including reporting. So that means that we're having conversations, often going to sit with leaders, trying to really deepen our understanding of their work so that we can represent it better, but also to lessen their burdens. And for me, it is about continuing to make space for this is crazy, you
Mm.
know. It's continuing to say, it's allowing the staff to say in our weekly check-ins, I'm having a really hard time. Kim, last week was the this. I'm sorry, it's gonna be sad for a second, but I'm gonna bring it back up. I lost my son 7 years ago, 8 years ago now. In 2017, he was 17 years old to lymphoma. And when I tell you, I cried. You couldn't see it on Zoom, right? But I every single day I was just releasing, and I wasn't like in a ugly cry, so my voice wasn't being impacted, but when I sent out my gratitude email to my team, which I normally don't obviously include anything about myself in those emails. I did let them know. I said, this is a tender week for me, and things are probably going to get moved, y'all, because I am struggling with this week as I normally do with the week I'm in right now. I'm like, these are just hard times. I need to be held differently. And so if I'm missing things or I'm not showing up the way that you need me to, please help me, just please help. And that is the space. And I think me saying to them, please help me, right? Like help me during this time, because I know I'm not going to be able to hold it up. And then they all come in saying, we got you. Thank you for letting us know. Thank you for the reminder. So I think one, being just honest about creating space for those so that we could be completely honest about where we're at. And really creating that space, like not rushing through it, creating space so that people can process all that is going on around us. Sometimes our meetings, we don't even get to the updates because they're not that fucking important.
Yeah,
Kim,
that's
beep it
totally
out. Okay, they're just not that fucking important when my staff is telling me, about the things that are happening in their lives or how this world is impacting them. So that's how we center ourselves in humanity.
Oh, you know, I think about this a lot, and this goes back to what you were saying too about saying certain things out loud that maybe
Yes.
we were taught not to bring to the workplace, or
Hmm.
and I just feel so strongly that if we could all work and live in environments where we operated in the way that you just described, the dynamics would be so different, because so much of the self-doubt and the anxiety that we experience is because of the fact that we're trying to read each other's minds, that we don't feel safe enough to have these conversations. So we're carrying these burdens
Yeah.
individually instead of supporting one another. And I can just imagine an alternate world in which you are, this is a tough week for you. You're really carrying this, and maybe things do drop, or maybe
Yes.
you're not, you're looking, your mood is a little bit different, and everyone around you is like, what's going on with her?
Yeah. Right, right. No one knows, right? You're just
Yes,
like, stay away from Natanja this
yes,
week. Yeah, yeah. No, I
exactly.
don't want that.
Yeah, and then they're now in their heads, and like think about
Right.
the amount of lost energy and
Yes.
time because we're not just talking about
That's
what's
right.
real in this moment.
That's right. That's right. I think that is probably the biggest like the biggest mistake we have made in creating workspaces is asking people to compartmentalize themselves. Do you know what happens when you ask someone to bring their full selves? Like that means that the artist in them is coming through as well as the operations, right? Like I just think we have done ourselves such a disservice. I am also someone who, unfortunately, you're gonna get all this, Kim. You're gonna get all this, Natanja. So like, I don't know how to compartmentalize myself, which is probably why I was like, let me build something that allows us all to be. But I think it's especially in our work when we value so deeply lived experience, you can't say you value it. And then in the workplace, you're like, but don't bring all that in here. You know what I'm saying? Like, so for us, I'm like, no, no, bring it all. And everyone always asks. And it's funny, Kim, when you say we sometimes we don't say the thing. I was speaking at a Globe event for working moms, and there was just one line. I said, the next time it's towards the end, I said, the next time you're sitting in the room and you think, I don't want to say the thing, I said, say the fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let the room adjust. Why we adjust and put ourselves in all of these, like we're scrambled up almost inside because we're so busy performing instead of just being. And I think that there's so much good in just being. And that can come through if we put fear aside. And I know that that's really I want to say that I try to put fear aside some days and I win and some days I don't. So I'm not saying this as someone who is preachy or has this all down pat. I am saying that fear has always been something that has kind of rode alongside me, along with imposter syndrome, and both of them have to go into the trunk. They're luggage. They're not. I don't want them in the car with me when I'm driving. I need music. I need people who are feeding into me. I need to be reminded of who I am. This world pulls apart women every single day. Every single day. I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care. And so when we could get a hold of our own head trash and we start to replace those things, the things that, Natanja, you're not good enough. You're not going to be a great fundraiser. You're not going to be a good ED. You never did it before. How are you going to know what to do? I didn't have any of the answers, y'all. That's the journey. The journey is saying yes. The journey is saying, I don't have to have all the answers. I'm going to figure it out because I'm smart, I'm capable, because I have a community of people who won't let me fail, right? Like, because look at all of the other things I got through, right? Like, there was a time where I would have never told anyone I had a daughter at 15. And now I'm like, no, that is part of my story. That is part of who I am as a leader. So I do think it's yeah, I think that there are so many ways in which we can put fear and imposter syndrome behind us so that we can replace that with the positive thinking that we need in order to get our work done.
Well, and you just made a really important point too when you talked about the journey. It's like, you think back to when you're a kid and everything is new. Everything's for the first time. We didn't say like, oh, I can't do that because I've never done it
That's
before.
right. No, that you jumped at it, right? Because I
Yes.
never did it before.
hmm Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, and that I think always tells me that this is not the way that we were meant to operate. Because if
Yeah.
if we were meant to be, to experience imposter syndrome, this would have started at a much younger age.
Right.
But
That's
we
right.
we all are born with a growth mindset, right? Like
Yeah.
I always joke about if you watch toddlers learning to walk, like if how many toddlers would just be like, I'm just not cut out for
I
walking.
felt bad. Yeah, I'm on my bum now. I'm not going to be able to get up. Mom carry me for the next 60 years. It's like, no, 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 no. Yes, Kim, that's so funny. I think about that a lot. I think about like what was taken from us, like as we become adults, is especially women and gender expansive folks. I feel like the ability to be our individual selves, the ability to celebrate individuality, the ability to, because assimilation becomes the game, right? It's like, how do you assimilate? How do we fit in? I think I'm always looking for those who don't want to fit in. You know what I mean? Like when we think about it, I don't even want to look to any of our leaders right now, but if we looked at some of our leaders back in the day, we would probably see like they were kind of they were outliers, right? Like they were saying things that nobody else was saying. And so there's so much from us to draw from that. I think in terms of inspiration and a reminder that whoever you are, that you are here for a purpose and your voice and your experience matters more than you know. And that there's probably someone in that room that needs to hear you speak up. I always think about that. Like, I'm like, is there a younger person here that is probably just as uncomfortable with this conversation? And I know I'm going to have to be the one that has to say it. Yeah, sometimes we are. Say the thing, let the room adjust. Let the room adjust. And imposter syndrome to me, Kim, and I'll wrap on this, is it's part of the whole system, right? Like it is, to me, it's structural. It is part of like keeping women in certain places. It's why we're not making the same amount of money. It's why, right. I mean, there's so many reasons, and it's so complicated in terms of how imposter syndrome shows up in all sectors. But men don't normally have to deal with it quite as often as women do. And so that goes to show me that the system is working like it should. And if that is not a system we want to be a part of, I say, let's redesign it. Design it.
Yes. And I love that in everything that you're saying, like you're also doing the work, because what I hear you say too, every time you talk about doing the scary thing, is you're not just doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for everyone watching. And
Yes.
and going back to what you said about you need to see it to be it, right?
Yeah.
That if everyone else at every level is prioritizing conformity and assimilation,
Mhm.
nobody else feels permission to step
That's
outside of
right.
that, right? And so it takes a lot of courage and bravery. But to your point, like you look at the people that history remembers
Yes.
are always people who were different, who
Yes.
maybe were seen as unconventional or
Yeah.
crazy, or something about them was, but they made their mark because of who they were, and they were willing to embrace that.
That's right. That is exactly. I could not have said that better myself. That is exactly right, Kim. They made their mark because that's what we're here to do, right? I think a lot about impact and imprint. I can't be impactful every single day. So I want to be. I really do. That is the goal of the Boston Women's Fund. But some days are better. But every single day I want to leave an imprint. And I think about that. An imprint to me means, how did I make someone feel? Are they better off because of a conversation we had? Like are they seen? Did I remind them of who they are? Did I tell them a story about how they inspired me or what they did for me, that would let them walk away feeling so much better? Did I hold space? Did I just hold space for them to process something really hard? All of those things matter. And to me, imprint and impact are equally as important. But in our sector, we talk about impact, and it usually is a long game, but imprint can happen every single second of every single day. So
That is
come on and imprint with us. Imprint with us. Yes.
That is such a powerful reminder of the personal power that we all hold, even when it feels like we don't have.
That's right. We sure do, Kim. We sure do.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm just so inspired by you, your story, your work. I'm so grateful to you for being here. And I want to make sure everybody knows how they can find you, how they can support you, your mission. Where can we send everybody to learn more?
Yes, come to us. We would love to have you. So find us at www.boston, Boston, women's with an S, fund.org. Sign up for our newsletter. That's a great way to find out what we're happening. We have a report out that's really interesting about where the philanthropic dollars are going in Boston. Lots of ways to get engaged. As I said, we do everything with community. So join the ALEC. You could join our participatory grant making. Come volunteer with some of our grantees. There's so much need. And obviously a donation would go so far. So just so much gratitude, Kim, for you. Thank you for talking about this. It's such an important conversation. Literally our entire Horizon Collective leadership is about imposter syndrome. We never say that. It is the undercurrent. It's like, okay, how do we get rid of this head trash and make sure that our leaders are ready to lead with what is most important to them? So I am very grateful for your work and thankful for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really grateful to you as well. Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.